Welcome to Divorce and Relationships Decoded, the show that takes the guesswork out of love, loss, and everything in between. Hosted by me, Jennifer Perri, a CDC Certified Divorce and Empowerment Coach, and Dr. Deborah Wilder, a divorce and relationship expert. This is the place where real conversations meet expert advice. So get ready to decode divorce and relationships like never before. Divorce and Relationships Decoded starts now. Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of Divorce and Relationships Decoded. I am one of your hosts, Jennifer Perri. I'm a CDC Certified Divorce Coach, and I am joined by my friend, Dr. Deborah Wilder, who is a divorce and relationship specialist. How are you?
I'm doing well and always happy to be with you and happy to see you.
Today, we're going to talk about fear, and we're going to talk about how it presents itself and shows up in divorce, because it is one of the hardest things, if not the hardest chapter of your life that you're going to navigate. And you have fear around what's next. What does it mean for me? You have fear with your children. What does it mean for them? What does it look like? And the fear of the unknown, and maybe even stepping into the next relationship and building trust around that. So we today are going to hit fear head on. Are you up for that challenge?
I am up for that challenge, yes.
So the first thing I want to talk about is, let's just say you're right smack dab facing it for the first time, realizing, oh my goodness, this marriage is over and I have to figure out what's next for me. And it's really just the fear of the process. And it's the fear of, I don't want to make any mistakes. I financially don't want to make any mistakes. I don't want to make any mistakes with my children. So I want to ask you, when you're working with people, do you hear that there is fear about something specific when they're going through divorce, or is it just fear just takes over every aspect of their life?
I think fear, there's a global feeling of fear, but it's about specific things too. Like the umbrella of fear, but under the umbrella, there's the fear of what about the children? Certainly financial fear, and you could be a great one to address that. Fear about identity and fear about, as you say, the unknown, because I think divorce, more than anything else, even death, causes the most amount of change in the shortest amount of time. And so people get thrown off. Everybody's experience is different. If it's amicable and you go through it, there's usually still some fear around divorce. And there may be bullying or intimidation. One spouse might say, I'm going to take you for everything you've got, or you'll never see the children. Or if you ask for spousal support or alimony, I'm going to get custody of the kids. Sometimes there's that. Just fear, though, but that's a very normal response. And I was glad that we were going to talk about this today because, again, it's very normal to feel afraid with something like this. And fear, it's adaptive feeling. It's the fight or flight. It's one of the ways that we keep ourselves alive in some ways. It's our body's saying something's wrong or going to be wrong, or there's impending doom, or there's impending something, and we need to prepare for it. As long as we don't let fear overtake us to the point where we become somewhat inactive or we don't take care of what we need to take care of, then we'll work through it. And again, we don't have to do it alone because there are plenty of people to help with that. But fear is a very normal feeling, and it feels awful. It's a scary feeling. It's the insecurity and being unsure of what's next. Again, everything has changed. The foundation has been like an earthquake. The foundation has shifted permanently. It's there. And now where do you go? What do you do? How do you make sure the kids are okay? How do you make sure you're okay financially and personally and mentally and emotionally and all of that? But it's just a very normal response to this whole thing. And I think it's also important, as we talk about this, to let people know that we're not going to always be afraid. I think sometimes we feel so strongly that we wonder if we're ever going to not feel that way. And eventually we work through that and get to a place where it doesn't feel as massive as it does. But it's a normal feeling, and because there is a lot at stake. Everything can be at stake with some divorces. Every divorce is different, but that's a big one. And I'm curious what your thoughts and your experiences, because you've been a financial professional for decades. I'm curious, what has that looked like with your clients?
One of the biggest things, I think, more than anything that talked about, was the fear of change. And I know even for me, just recently moved. I was excited, but fearful. You get ready to travel. You're excited, but fearful. I think financially, I would say that's probably one of the biggest areas that most women struggle with that I see and that I work with. And I think it's the fear of they didn't have a lot of control in their financial life. They didn't have a lot of say in their financial life. They didn't have a lot of visibility in their financial life. So now when they're facing divorce, even if they are the person that initiated it, they're now the attorneys want all of these things, all of this stuff. And when you haven't had a part in that, that would be like I've gone and I've attended Broadway shows. Yeah, I like them. I can give you a little bit of information about who's in them and what it's about, but I don't know the inner workings of how it happens and how it comes about and all the hidden stuff. That's how you look at finances. Yeah, I know we have money. Obviously, we can live. I know that there are certain, I know my husband has a job and I have a job and we have savings, but I don't really know how that all comes together. One of the things that I really try to get the women that I work with to understand is this is your opportunity to feel really financially empowered, even if you never have, even if you don't have a relationship with money, even if you haven't had your hands in the family finances. This is your opportunity to learn. This is your opportunity to take control, to be confident, to feel empowered about those things. And you need to start doing it now. I have had women that I have worked with, and I'm sure you have seen them too, where it gets too overwhelming. There's so much bullying that's going on from the soon to be ex-spouse or maybe family members or whoever. There's so much noise going on around them that they want to just throw in the towel.
Yes.
They don't want to fight. I had a conversation yesterday with a woman, and her soon to be ex-spouse is just bullying and making all of these decisions and going and changing things and moving money out of their account into another account and continuously coming back and saying things like, I'm the one that makes the money. I'm the one that calls the shots. That's not how this works. So it's understanding that fear, even though it feels really real, it's not always what it seems to be. And I know that they say it's false evidence appearing real. That's what fear stands for, false evidence appearing real. So when you have somebody who is in your face, if you were married, I was married to a narcissist and would constantly say things like that to belittle, to make me not believe in myself, to not trust my abilities. And you start to believe that. But then when you start questioning it and you start looking at it like, I'm not stupid. I can figure stuff out. I do have talents that God has blessed me with. I think I can go on and have a life outside of you. I think I can build a relationship with money outside of you. You start realizing that is false evidence. That's not true. I think financially, it's definitely one of the cornerstones in navigating divorce that causes the most chaos for women. And the best thing I can advise in that space, if you're going through divorce and you're fearful financially, sit and figure out why that is. You have a lot of money limiting beliefs that you're not really sure where they came from, but they're there. You're not going to have enough. You're not going to be able to take care of yourself. Sit down and figure out where that's coming from. Call me. I'll sit down and help you figure out where that's coming from. And then understanding your money personality. I see so many women who don't have a connection with their finances because how they're invested or how their husband has them invested does not correlate with who they are and their financial DNA. So it's understanding who you are financially is definitely another place to really begin and to look at. And then just gather the information that you need. If you don't have any real idea of what your finances are, start doing your due diligence on that. Look and see. You are on a majority of the bills, I'm sure. And I know that Georgia is a state that if you are married, there are companies that you can call and find out more information on just because you are the spouse. We found that out with our mortgage company. Georgia protects that where spouses have the ability to gain access to certain accounts. So I'm not sure you're listening to this from, see if that's something that applies to your state. Obviously, tax returns, if you're filing joint, you have access to those as well. So gather your information, do your due diligence, start pulling your stuff together. And if you're not sure what to do next, that's why you call me. That's why you sit down with a CDFA. That's why you work with somebody in the financial arena of divorce and how they handle it to help you make sense of it. Because you're going to have those questions. You're going to have to face them. The attorney is going to need certain things that you need from you to understand what your current budget is and then what looking forward your budget might be. So it's important. This is your time to take that fear and that worry and use it for good. Rechannel it into, I'm going to start pulling this together. I'm going to get all my information together. You may get a little bit of pushback, but if there's anything that obviously I can do to help you, please let me know. But when you're working with clients, do you see people that are coming in that are going through divorce because there were financial issues?
I don't see too many people getting divorced because of financial problems, if that was your question. But I do, it's interesting. I have folks I'm working with who are wealthy, but they're still afraid. And the reality checks, they're going to be more than just fine when the divorce is final, but they're still afraid, and that's normal. Again, because there's still uncertainty there. And I have others who let's say are stay-at-home moms who worked in the home, raising the children, taking care of the home, but they didn't get paid for it. So it's one of my soapbox things. You work in the home or work out of the home, but working in the home, you just don't get paid for it. But if you did put a price tag on those things, or
afford it,
you'd be earning a lot of money if you outsourced. And I'm working with one woman in particular whose husband is a real piece of work and doesn't even give her the minimum to take care of the kids, to make sure they have food, and she has to go to him. And it's such a power play. It's a sick and toxic thing. And so she's afraid of financially, she's afraid. And he's got a whole bunch of money set aside in a separate sort of thing, depending on who you're dealing with. If you're dealing with a decent human being who wants to work things out, it's still scary. But at least it's not, you don't have that element of the bullying or the intimidation or the sickness or the toxicity or someone just being a jerk and abusing power. So there's real fear of, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get my kids anything more than a sandwich for lunch, or make a sandwich for lunch, or they're not going to have lunch money to bring to school because their father or their mother is making me ask for it, or making the kids ask for it. So really I talk about it all the time, the spectrum, but there any point along the way. But even those folks who are wealthy, who will be just fine financially, they're still probably afraid, and understandably, it just knocks people off. So there's a whole range of reactions. People can go into a panic mode. And nowadays too, with trying to figure out, what do you do with the house? If you can't keep the house, what do? You sell it, you split the equity or whatever, and then what do? Do you buy a house? What if you don't qualify? The interest rates, what if you just can't even afford to purchase another house because of those things, and the rent? So many things are thrown off. And you talked about the FEAR. What did that stand for?
False evidence appearing real.
Okay, I love that, because I was thinking reality checking. When people get to that point of being afraid, they really need an anchor of reality checking. Just if you see it in black and white. And I always encourage my folks too, or often, who are struggling with realizing, I've got enough, I've got more than enough, I'm going to be okay for the rest of my life. Or I don't have enough. I don't have enough to go into next month. I can't afford an attorney. I can't afford to go. We're paying all that stuff. But the reality checking and checking with financial people, just to literally map it out in black and white to see what life looks like now, and 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. I encourage folks to work with a financial professional to map those things out, just to have a greater sense of security, because that fear can just stop us in our tracks. I know when I was going through my divorce, I just was afraid. I was just afraid, and so many feelings. Even if I knew, okay, this is the next step. But still, it's just, the fear is it's a normal feeling. It's appropriate to feel afraid when you're going through this, no matter what your financial picture looks like. But if it's not so great, it really can keep us in a panicked state, because it is that fight or flight, or that survival mode. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? How am I going to take care of not only my kids, but myself? Especially when you have someone in your ear saying, I'm going to take all your money and you're not going to get anything. If you ask for kids, you get no money, or blah, blah, blah. I'm going to take the kid. Fear is normal. It's an awful feeling much of the time, but it's a very normal feeling. And we're not going to feel that way always. It'll change.
You're right. We're not going to feel that way always. And I think that's one of the things that I want people to get when we come on every week and we talk about topics like this is it's not always going to be this way. And you can be surrounded by people who have answers to your questions, who can help settle your fears. You say it all the time that knowledge is power, and applying that knowledge is even more powerful. You and I both have people around us who support us and support our clients who have answers to those questions, who can help put some of that fear at bay. And I want my clients to focus on, and what I even in my own personal life try to focus on, what can I control?
Yeah.
And if you are fearful around your finances, I just want to say this before we shift into fear around your kids, educate yourself, work with someone, whether it's myself, whether it's a CDFA, whether you have a great relationship with a financial person, work with them. They can give you, I can provide you a checklist of what you're going to need. If you're navigating the process, you're going to need to put your hands on. So please reach out to me. I'm happy to do that. But take that worry and take that fear and use it for fuel. Use it for fuel to make yourself empowered about what you're doing. Educate yourself, realize what's out there, know what your options are. But again, it's taking that worry and that fear and using it for fuel to educate yourself and feel empowered. I want to shift gears for a minute because I know one of the biggest topics that always comes up when I'm working with my clients in the divorce coaching capacity, and I'm sure as you're working with people that are navigating divorce, is our kids. When you see fear showing up around children in divorce, how does that come out in the people that you work with?
I think most parents are afraid of how their children are going to react, that they're going to be brokenhearted if they find out that their parents are going to get divorced, or how it's going to affect them that their parents are going to get divorced. So that's probably the initial fear of how are they going to feel once they find out we're splitting up. Now, there are families where the kids are like, what took you so long? Like, why didn't you do this a long time ago? I've been waiting for this conversation.
I was one of those with my parents. I was like, how much more can my mom tolerate is how I felt. Not to interrupt you, but yeah.
That's perfect. So you had that, you were not brokenhearted about it as much as, of course, it's upsetting, but it's okay. What took you so long? Or now that's not as typical, I think, as kids. And a lot of kids aren't necessarily surprised, but they're still, and they're afraid. So not only are the parents afraid, then the kids become afraid much of the time. And depending on their ages, mostly the little kids, like if, up to age 3, they're so pliable that as long as the parents get along well enough and keep conflict away, that the kids have a much better chance of doing well emotionally and mentally. But if there's high conflict, it's going to affect the kids in a negative way. So it's the parents' responsibility to take care of the kids, keep the conflict away. That's on the parents. But it is scary. Is my child going to be upset with me? Is my child going to feel like he or she has to choose? Or they want to go stay with the other parent, or they don't want to see the other parent. So all sorts of things come up. And something else too, there's so much to talk about here, but I know now, let's say you're a parent who's been with the kids every single day. That's going to change. So that can be heartbreaking. I'm not going to see my kids every day. And then you don't have control over what happens in the other parent's house. So it may be that you don't trust that other parent to really take care of the kids in the way that you would. And unless you can really prove that parent is unfit or a danger to the children, there's really not much, if anything, you can do about it. And then you have different parenting styles and all of that. But it is scary. Am I going to be able, do we have to move? Can I keep the kids in private school, or do they have to go to public school? Or whose district do we have to live in? All these things. So it is very scary. And again, depending on the ages of the kids, and I think we've talked about this in one of our shows about how the kids can be affected based on their ages with divorce. But one of the biggest things that I hear, and you've probably heard it a million times as well, is one spouse saying to the other, basically the intimidation kind of thing, the bullying. If you're going to ask for this, I'm going to go after custody of the kids. and they don't want custody of the kids.
Nope.
It's just
They
a
don't.
power play. They don't want. Can you imagine if they got custody of the kids? They'd be like, oh, they don't. It's not about that. Again, this is a parent who's not putting the children first. It's about scaring the other parent into letting some of the finances go. That's what that's about typically. So if you're out there listening and you are hearing from your spouse saying, I'm going to you either accept this, or if you ask for alimony, I'm going to go for full custody and you'll get every other weekend or whatever. Don't. That's that fear. And this is typically a relationship that fear has been a part of. Intimidation and bullying, those things have been a part of that relationship. So by that time, that spouse is pretty worn down and is used to that power differential there. And as you go through divorce, that's not going to change. The bully is still going to be the bully. It just, as we say, puts on a suit and tie and goes to court. So those are things. So there's being afraid, there's feeling afraid. And then there's also another component, which is very important, is dealing with it mentally and emotionally and physically. Because when we're in a state of fear, it's more of a reactive state. It's a survival kind of part that our body plays. We need to learn how to deal with and heal and become stronger mentally and emotionally and physically. I call it divorce brain as we go through this, because it really, at the time, if you think about it, the time in our lives when we've got to make the most important decision that will affect the rest of our lives, the rest of our children's lives, we are in a headspace of not the best decision-making place. So we need to make sure that we can get to that place of being good decision makers, even in the midst of fear and stress and all that. So there are things that we can do. And we also don't want to show up like we're breaking down, because then that's not a good look. Even if we are feeling like we're breaking down, we've got to deal with that in a different way, because that will often be used against us. And I think we've touched on that before. So much to talk about here. But fear is, I think, a universal feeling as we go through divorce. If you look at Jeff Bezos, right? I don't think there was any concern about money. Is he going to be homeless? Was he going to be able to afford an apartment? But I'm sure there was fear there from both of them, figuring out, what is this going to look like? So even there, where there's never going to be, most likely, ever, any real impact financially that's going to make any kind of real difference on a day-to-day basis, I'm sure they were still afraid of what might happen because there's so much uncertainty. But it's a universal feeling. It's a very normal feeling. We have to make sure that we deal with it and keep ourselves emotionally well, mentally well, and capable, and physically. We've got to make sure that we are eating as best as we can, staying hydrated, getting out and taking some walks, getting a little bit of exercise, something, and dealing with this stress. Otherwise, it comes out as headaches and neck pain, shoulder pain, and stomach pain, and just we'll feel it physically. But we need to be as mentally with it as possible as we're going through this. And again, with this kind of divorce brain, stress brain, we're not. So we have to be really, I think, purposeful in dealing with this. But again, we've talked about this. You don't have to do it alone. Let people help guide you, hold you up, suggest things, or just talk to you about, what do you think is going on here? What do you think would be best? And get that support for your children too. But it's a regular fear, but financially, and you see it, you deal with that. I deal with it in a different way. We address finances in a certain kind of way, and I'll do it in a minimal way as far as when I do mediations and things like that. But when it's out of my kind of wheelhouse and I stay in my lane, I will absolutely refer to a CDFA or a financial professional, or to deal with the financial part, attorney to talk to about that. But fear is, we all know what it's like, but we just have to, in this kind of time, again, where we are responsible for making the most important decisions that we're going to have to make, at least in a long time, we've got to make sure that we're strong enough and with it enough to be able to do that. So it's rough. It's a rough road, that too.
It is rough. One of the things I try to train my clients into doing is just standing in this Wonder Woman pose and something hits you, and which way do you want to send it? Do you want to send it to where it's something that you're actually worried about and you want to investigate further, or do you want to just send it right to the trash? So as it's coming in, be like, oh, this hit me in a way. They're saying my ex is trying to bully and saying you're not going to have enough money to do A, B, and C. But if it hits you and you want to investigate that, let it go over to this pile. If it hits you and it's just them doing exactly what they've always done and belittle you and badger you and whatever, just hit it to the trash, send it to the trash. You have to almost stand there in that protective bubble of, I already know it's going to come at me. Now, if there's things that I don't know enough of, if there are things that are invoking curiosity, then I want to check that out. I want to investigate that. But if it's something that's tearing me down and just making me feel horrible, that goes right to the trash. And it's a technique that takes time to develop. There's one lady that I work with, and we talk once a week, and she's always, a trash pile's really full, dump it. And it's literally about creating a habit.
Yeah.
And knowing because you're going through divorce, you're gonna come up against things you never thought about, you never understood, you never encountered, obviously. So they may cause you to be curious about finding the answer. Curiosity is fine. There's nothing wrong with being curious about something. So go out, comes back to the education piece. Educate yourself in who you can work with, get the answers to these questions, investigate them. That's curiosity. You're taking that energy and you're fueling your curiosity instead of fueling your worry and your fear, and then dumping the trash out. Just take the trash out. Trash around this house comes once a week and we put it on the curb, but I put stuff in my trash bin all the time. And rewiring your brain and rewriting your thoughts takes time, but it can happen. It happened to me, and I had to rewire a lot.
Yeah.
And teaching clients to do that, it allows you to be very powerful. And the whole thing I want you to do is, no matter how fearful you are, start doing one little thing every day that you feel really good about. One little thing that you feel stronger than you did the day before. And you're just going to keep stacking upon that and educating yourself on what's going on financially. And as far as the children goes, there's a lot there. Like you say, there's a lot to unpack. Just be present every day. Face every day a new day. Don't worry so much about where things are heading. You're going to get there. You're going to sort that out along the way. Don't worry about what happened in the past. Every day is a new opportunity for you to make changes, get your questions answered, be less fearful. One of the things that I use when you were talking about how a spouse can say, if you're going to do this, I'm going to go for custody. And I tell my clients, here's a strategy. There's things that your ex is going to specifically ask for. Put them on your list of wants. They're bargaining chips. So there's a lady whose husband has a collection of cars, because I deal with clients that have very small net worth and very large net worth. There's a collection of cars. She wanted half of them. She knew she didn't want half of them. Just like the ex doesn't really want full custody of the kids, but she put them on there because they were acquired during the marriage. So there has to be a decision about who's going to get what. And they become bargaining chips. And it allows you to have a little bit of control, because they're not going to be in the least bit expecting you to ask for them. But why not? Why not go in and ask for whatever it is? And that has worked quite a few times with ladies that'll come back to me and be like, oh my God, I did what we talked about. Yeah. That was such an amazing thing. But I have learned in my life, and I've seen happen unfold time and time again. As soon as you start taking any power back, it frightens the other person. They may never show it. They may never say it. They may get a little nastier before they get better. But once they see that they can't get at you anymore, once they see that your trash bin is full, I have seen so many things unfold just when a woman takes her power back. And it's not just in divorce, it's in life in general. But before we wrap up, do you have strategies that you find are very effective?
I think it's important to learn how to calm the mind and calm the body down, because fear it's a physiological reaction and response as well as the emotion. So we talk about relaxation, we talk about mindfulness, we talk about reality checking, we talk about becoming more empowered versus being victimized, let's say, by a very toxic person, emotional abuser or narcissist or both, or just someone anyway. So yes, we've got to learn how to relax, because when you talk about getting to the point of not worrying about the future or the past. Just stay present focused and take steps to get to that place. That's hard to do sometimes, but it's a great goal and it's a great thing. I love the Wonder Woman idea that just put that one in the trash or that one in the curiosity question list. I think it's very important to recognize what stress does to us and to really work on getting more centered, to work on feeling more secure. And as the security goes up, the fear is going to go down, and then we're going to position ourselves much better to make certain decisions. And again, we don't have to do this alone. There's so many people who've gone through divorce who can just be there in all sorts of different ways. But learning how to deal with the stress is very critical, because if we're constantly in that stress state, we're going to get sick, and we're not going to show up as well for our children, and we're not going to make the best decisions. So we really need to, and if we're still in that toxic environment, that's another thing too. A lot of people have to stay living together as they're going through this. So they can't necessarily escape the toxicity of that. So we have to learn different ways of dealing with the enemy within sometimes. It's not like you can lock your doors and that person isn't welcome. You're living under the same roof and the same interactions with the kids. So sometimes we have to develop expectations for what does that look like? What are the best ways of dealing with that? So depending on how stressed, how fearful, there's always a way to deal with it. And to find out what those ways are, that would be most helpful to decrease the body's stress and the emotion and the mental stress as well. So with methods like you're talking about, I love that. I think it's wonderful. I also think it's important that if we're struggling, that we work hard at not being disappointed in ourselves for not being able to do some things. We're like, why am I still stressed after all this time? It's because things are stressful. Just give yourself a break too. So I know this is a very important topic, and I'm glad that we talked about it today.
And I am too. And I think just in wrapping up, key takeaways are fear is normal. It's going to be a part of what you face, not just as you're navigating divorce, just in general, but really take the energy and focus on what you can control. Understand that you don't have to go through it by yourself. Be curious, but send stuff to the trash. And know more than anything that you are surrounded by people who understand you, who have been exactly where you are. And we're just a phone call, an email, a text message, a DM away. So thank you, as always, Dr. Wilder, for coming on and talking about this very important topic with me. I always enjoy our conversations. And if you are watching this and you haven't subscribed yet, shame on you. Now, subscribe and share. And remember to submit your questions to questions@drdecoded.com. And we will be back next week with another topic. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
That's a wrap for this episode of Divorce and Relationships Decoded. We hope you found today's discussion insightful and empowering. If this conversation resonated with you, we'd love for you to share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Remember, healing, growth, and transformation happens one conversation at a time. If you have a question, a story, or a topic you'd love for us to explore, we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a note at questions@drdecoded.com. Your thoughts and experiences are always welcome here. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week for another insightful episode of Divorce and Relationships Decoded. Until then, take care and keep moving forward.